So I'm going to close this image here, and I don't want to save it. Next, we're going to talk about the opposite of blurring. Sometimes you don't want to soften edges, you want to make them more defined. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and select Hans Chris. And this is a statue of Hans Christian Andersen. And we kind of are buddies a little bit, so I call him Hans Chris. We're cool like that. So I'm going to zoom in close here to this statue. And there are some beautiful details in both the statue, the leaves, and the brick wall that I want to bring out a little bit more. In times past, we'd go to the Filter menu, select Sharpen, and select Unsharp Mask. That was the standard sharpening tool. We would change the amount to increase the intensity of the sharpening. We could also bump up radius, although you never want to bump up radius to more than 2 pixels. And we could also fiddle with the threshold. The problem is that unsharp mask gets really bad really quick. And before you know it, you have an ugly image. So I'm going to hit cancel here. I don't want to do this. So now I'm going to go up to the filter menu and go back to the sharpen submenu. And this time, instead of selecting unsharp mask, I'm going to select smart sharpen, a newer, better version of unsharp mask that gives us a lot more control and processes a lot more accurately. So I'm going to select Smart Sharpen. And I'm actually going to zoom in here using the tools inside the Smart Sharpen dialog box. I want to see a little bit of his statue and a little bit of these leaves and a little bit of this brick here. Now again, I can click with my hand to see the before and let go to see the after. Okay, that's pretty intense. First thing I want to do is check more accurate, so it processes a little bit more accurately. And I want to take this amount down. I don't want that much sharpening. That looks pretty good. Click here. Wow, look how blurry it was before. We're really bringing a lot of detail back to it. But a lot of these leaves, I don't know, it looks a little bad. So we might want to bring this down a little bit more. Now, we could bring it down to where those plants look good, but then you might argue that there's not really enough sharpening in these bricks or in the statue, and that's really the point of the sharpening. So I do like a value that's a little bit higher, so we can see a little bit more of the details of the statue. I could uncheck preview and then check preview. Maybe it's a little bit too intense, but it looks pretty good. Be aware though, and we don't have any motion blur here, but we can remove Gaussian blur, basically just standard blurriness, or we could remove lens blur or motion blur from Smart Sharpen as well. And that's something that Unsharp Mask was incapable of doing. There's also an advanced tab over here that gives us individual controls over shadow and highlight sharpening as well. I'm going to go back to basic for right now, and let's go ahead and hit OK. Now I'm going to zoom out to 100%, and I actually think this looks pretty clean. You can see the bricks a little bit better, the statue's a little bit better, but at the same time, the plants look a little too over-sharpened. They look a little fake and stale. So again, with sharpening, it might behoove you to do some selection areas, but you want to watch out for these white highlights. Essentially, what sharpen does is that it enhances the contrast between different colors. So it makes the lighter one lighter and the darker one darker. Well, pretty soon, you start having areas that are lighter get way too light, and areas that are dark get way too dark. So you need to be careful that you do this in moderation and cautiously so that your image doesn't look ridiculous. When you start having things like this, where it's a little bit too white or a little bit too dark, they call those, in Photoshop nerd language, halos. So these halos are indications that I over-sharpened these plants. But again, the bricks look pretty cool, and so does the statue. So it's a toss-up. Anyways, that's the nuts and bolts of sharpening. Usually after sizing up an image, you'd want to sharpen. And a lot of times if you have an image that's a little bit blurry, it's always good to go through and run a little bit of sharpening on it. Definitely helps to clean things up and keep those details rich in your image.